So, we'll be continuing with yesterday's discussion of somatotypes. Good bit of writing today, and then, I mean, not in the form of a dictation, but you'll be writing a lot of things. Slide change I made in the sequence. So what we do is we will have a small talk on Sheldon's somatotypes. Then I will also incorporate another such scheme of somatotypic studies. After having spoken about them, I am actually to continue into kinanthropometry, but before kinanthropometry, I would introduce the term applied anthropology, because all that comes in applied anthropology. One question looks to be important now in the current anthropology, that is distinction between applied and action anthropology. So that is one topic that we will talk about. Maybe perhaps based on how comfortable you are, we will try writing a few things on that. Then I will take you to kinanthropometry or sports anthropology. That's the scheme for the day. And I have already given you the timetable. Originally, in the actual timetable, I have placed Saturday as the test, but maybe perhaps I may have my class on Saturday, and Sunday you'll be writing your test. Okay? So that I don't miss you in between. So, I'd start with something so that you come into the right mood. Yeah, I know.
I'm here today to talk to you about a very powerful little word, one that people will do almost anything to avoid becoming. Billion-dollar industries thrive because of the fear of it, and those of us who undeniably are it are left to navigate a relentless storm surrounding it. I'm not sure if any of you have noticed, but I'm fat. Not the lowercase muttered behind my back kind, or the seemingly harmless chubby or cuddly. I'm not even the more sophisticated voluptuous or curvaceous kind. Let's not sugarcoat it. I am the capital F-A-T kind of fat. I am the elephant in the room. When I walked out on stage, some of you may have been thinking, oh, this is going to be hilarious, because everybody knows that fat people are funny. Or you may have been thinking, where does she get her confidence from? Because a confident fat woman is almost unthinkable. The fashion-conscious members of the audience may have been thinking how fabulous I look in this Beth Ditto dress. Thank you very much. Where some of you might have thought, oh, black would have been so much more slimming. You may have wondered, consciously or not, if I have diabetes, or a partner, or if I eat carbs after 7 p.m. You may have worried that you ate carbs after 7 p.m. last night, and that you really should renew your gym membership. These judgments are insidious. They can be directed at individuals and groups, and they can also be directed at ourselves. And this way of thinking is known as fat phobia. Like any form of systematic oppression, fat phobia is deeply rooted in complex structures like capitalism, patriarchy, and racism. And that can make it really difficult to see, let alone challenge. We live in a culture where being fat is seen as being a bad person. Lazy, greedy, unhealthy, irresponsible, and morally suspect. And we tend to see thinness as being universally good, responsible, successful, and in control of our appetites, bodies, and lives. We see these ideas again and again in the media, in public health policy, doctors' offices, in everyday conversations, and in our own attitudes. We may even blame fat people themselves for the discrimination they face because, after all, if we don't like it, we should just lose weight. Easy. This anti-fat bias has become so integral, so ingrained to how we value ourselves and each other, that we rarely question why we have such contempt for people of size and where that disdain comes from. But we must question it, because the enormous value we place on how we look affects every one of us. And do we really want to live in a society where people are denied their basic humanity if they don't subscribe to some arbitrary form of acceptable? So when I was 6 years old, my sister used to teach ballet to a bunch of little girls in our garage. I was about a foot taller and a foot wider than most of the group. When it came to doing our first performance, I was so excited about wearing a pretty pink tutu. I was going to sparkle. As the other girls slipped easily into their lycra and tulle creations, not one of the tutus was big enough to fit me. I was determined not to be excluded from the performance. So I turned to my mother and, loud enough for everyone to hear, said, "Mum, I don't need a tutu. I need a 4-4. Thanks, Mum. And although I didn't recognise it at the time, claiming space for myself in that glorious 4-4 was the first step towards becoming a radical fat activist. Now, I'm not saying that this whole body love thing has been an easy skip along a glittering path of self-acceptance since that day in class. Far from it. I soon learnt that living outside what the mainstream considers normal can be a frustrating and isolating place. I've spent the last 20 years unpacking and deprogramming these messages, and it's been quite the roller coaster. I've been openly laughed at, abused from passing cars, and been told that I'm delusional. I also receive smiles from strangers who recognise what it takes to walk down the street with a spring in your step and your head held high. Thanks. And through it all, that fierce little 6-year-old has stayed with me, and she has helped me stand before you today as an unapologetic fat person. A person that simply refuses to subscribe to the dominant narrative about how I should move through the world in this body of mine. And I'm not alone. I am part of an international community of people who choose to, rather than passively accepting that our bodies are, and probably always will be big, we actively choose to flourish in these bodies as they are today. People who honour our strength and work with, not against, our perceived limitations. People who value health as something much more holistic than a number on an outdated BMI chart. Instead, we value mental health, self-worth, and how we feel in our bodies as vital aspects to our overall well-being. People who refuse to believe that living in these fat bodies is a barrier to anything, really. There are doctors, academics and bloggers who have written countless volumes on the many facets of this complex subject. There are fashionistas who reclaim their bodies and their beauty by wearing fat bikinis and crop tops, exposing the flesh that we're all taught to hide. There are fat athletes who run marathons, teach yoga, or do kickboxing, all done with a middle finger firmly held up to the status quo. And these people have taught me that radical body politics is the antidote to our body-shaming culture. But to be clear, I'm not saying that people shouldn't change their bodies if that's what they want to do. Reclaiming yourself can be one of the most gorgeous acts of self-love and can look like a million different things. From hairstyles to tattoos to body contouring to hormones to surgery and yes, even weight loss. It's simple. It's your body and you decide what's best to do with it. My way of engaging in activism is by doing all the things that we fatties aren't supposed to do, and there's a lot of them, inviting other people to join me, and then making art about it. The common thread through most of this work has been reclaiming spaces that are often prohibitive to bigger bodies. From the catwalk to club shows, from public swimming pools to prominent dance stages. And reclaiming spaces en masse is not only a powerful artistic statement, but a radical community building approach. This was so true of Aquaporco, the Fat Femme synchronised swim team I started with a group of friends in Sydney. The impact of seeing a bunch of defiant fat women in flowery swimming caps and bathers throwing their legs in the air without a care should not be underestimated. Throughout my career, I have learnt that fat bodies are inherently political, and unapologetic fat bodies can blow people's minds. When director Kate Champion of acclaimed dance theatre company Force Majeure asked me to be the artistic associate on a work featuring all fat dancers, I literally jumped at the opportunity. And I mean literally. Nothing to Lose is a work made in collaboration with performers of size who drew from their lived experiences to create a work as varied and authentic as we all are. And it was as far from ballet as you could imagine. The very idea of a fat dance work by such a prestigious company was, to put it mildly, controversial, because nothing like it had ever been done on mainstream dance stages before, anywhere in the world. People were sceptical. What do you mean, fat dancers? Like size 10, size 12 kind of fat? Where did they do their dance training? Are they going to have the stamina for a full-length production? But despite the scepticism, Nothing to Lose became a sellout hit of Sydney Festival. We received rave reviews, toured, won awards, and were written about in over 27 languages. These incredible images of our cast were seen worldwide. I've lost count of how many times people of all sizes have told me that the show has changed their lives, how it helped them shift their relationship to their own and other people's bodies, and how it made them confront their own bias. But of course, work that pushes people's buttons is not without its detractors. I have been told that I'm glorifying obesity. I have received violent death threats and abuse for daring to make work that centres fat people's bodies and lives and treats us as worthwhile human beings with valuable stories to tell. I've even been called the ISIS of the obesity epidemic. A comment so absurd that it is funny, but it also speaks to the panic, the literal terror that the fear of fat can evoke. It is this fear that's feeding the diet industry, which is keeping so many of us from making peace with our own bodies, for waiting to be the after photo before we truly start to live our lives. Because the real elephant in the room here is fat phobia. Fat activism refuses to indulge this fear. By advocating for self-determination and respect for all of us, we can shift society's reluctance to embrace diversity and start to celebrate the myriad of ways there are to have a body. Thank you.
So you do that at home. She will talk about how she was associated with fashion industry. That looks to be very surprising, that she can be a part of the fashion industry. And she also talks about what are the problems of the fat people. And basically it is something like not being judgmental, but to be more sympathetic, and various other capitalistic and political issues that she will be talking about. So you can see that fully later, because we don't have much time, otherwise I would have loved to watch with you throughout. I'm taking you to Sheldon's model that we have done in the last class. That is what we were talking about. See, I'm trying to emphasize on Sheldon for one reason, that is, when it comes to the application of somatotypic experiments and studies, he was one of the initial persons to do that. We have certain other people as well who did give some kind of categorizations. I'll try to put the complete discussion about this man in maybe 2-3 major points. What we have seen in yesterday's class was, this was a man who was trying to categorize people based on the physical forms of the individuals. And that has been a tendency, as we have seen so many days in the class, that categorization may be based on nationality, may be based on some vital element. Categorization has always been ingrained in anthropological writings. I hope you are there. And we also made a mention at some place that in the old physical anthropology, categorization of people was a fashion. They were not trying to look into the reason behind the differences. So everything said and done, Sheldon was using the old physical anthropological approach of categorizing people based on the physical features. But then there is something else to it. For an exclusive question, say on maybe somatotypes or maybe Sheldon himself, for the exclusive questions, what we expect from you is, we have to talk about the applications of his work, This was a man who was not simply associated with either sociological study of people or maybe biological study of people. He was a practicing psychologist as well. And he was existing at a time when Mead was also trying to give her own writings. So what you should remember is, whenever you are answering a question on somatotypes, Mead pops up as a critique of most of these classifications. Okay. I mean, these are I actually thought I would leave it there in yesterday's class, but then I thought I should add some more, anthropological spice to the categorization. I mean, these are the things that are largely missed out by the students in general. So don't forget Mead's criticisms, whether it would be Sheldon's classification. We once we finish this, we will also be going to one other person by name Kretschmer. So these are the two popular models, though quite a number of others are there. Don't worry about him, we'll come to him. We have entered that particular part of the syllabus where we on a daily basis would be getting newer names. Many times spelling and pronunciation might also be difficult. That's where you'll have to be cautious enough. I was showing that small video because she had said, if you had noticed, that fat people are considered to be having certain behavioral traits. She was talking about laziness, carelessness, irresponsibility, indiscipline, lacking patriotism and all that stuff. Maybe unhealthy and kind of things. That shows that maybe you'll have to talk to fat people, talk to me also sometimes. What makes us feel the way we make feel, and then what makes us what we are, the kind of globes that we become. So you'll have to talk to them and understand what's happening behind the scene. Because everything that you see may not be communicative enough of the background of what's happening. So all these classifications, somatotypic classifications, were neglecting the reasons behind why they are what they are. That's the principal, criticism. Mead comes up with that criticism. You are trying to give generalizations. Though you people have criticized me about sampling errors and all that stuff. The kind of sampling work that you are doing and the conclusions you are drawing are so general, not specific to the individuals. So that, and you're not going into the reasons behind why particular physical form is existing. You're there. Now Sheldon I was talking about this behavioral thing because Sheldon was relating behavioral element with the physical forms. And within the behavioral element, he was more concerned about one that was criminality. So I have brought so many things into it. See, initially when we had begun with the discussion of somatotypes, we were mostly trying to show that, okay, somatotypic classifications are necessary to choose your sport or where you can be active. So this is one application of somatotypic studies. The other ones which gained less popularity from the Sheldon's writings was correlating behavioral elements with the body forms. Maybe, if at all I say somebody like an ectomorph is there. Ectomorphs, according to them, could be the people who are shy, who are less confident. On the other hand, maybe the endomorphs are the ones who are having the negative traits. They can be associated with elements such as delinquency or maybe some type of small crime. On the other hand, because their prospects are not so high, the fat people's prospects are not so high, so they get into criminal tendencies much easily when compared to the others. On the other hand, the wedge-shaped people, the mesomorphs, are those people who have disciplined lives and then disciplined behavior, aspiring people, ambitious people. This is the one. So 3 categories they are trying to be. One, the shy lot, who are less confident. The second group of people who have everything positive with them. And the people on the upper side, the higher side, they have a criminal tinge. Now, when you have given these kind of classifications, this kind of behavioral thing attached to the body form, keeping aside what they must have said, what could be the physical qualifications to be a criminal? Like every job has some qualifications, right? Every job has some desirable features, maybe mental, maybe physical, maybe intellectual, whatever kind of. He has to be really fit. You should be really fit so that people cannot catch hold of you. Now, you remember in the old time movies, if the thief had to go, he would put all oil and go so that, even if people catch hold of him and kind of. But now I don't think we are at that time. Now the criminals have to be much more smarter, physically fit, technocrats. Yeah, technocrats. They have to be real technocrats. Because the crime is not with the physical looting. It is actually applying your mind and doing the stuff. So where is the body necessary there? And if at all I say physical form. Huh? Who said? Mentally also they should be fit. Emma? They should be more fit and alert. See, so much of alertness, a physical form, intellect, meaning that a civil servant need not have all that, but still you can clear the exam. You can be the peers, you can be, or with all the kind of negativity, you can be there in the services. But this man, for his survival, because every time he is playing a game with his life. Hence, that was a major thing that was. So, three different things come together in the Sheldon scheme. We will see several other people's ideas on them, and then this man also. Don't worry writing, just have a look at this. He was giving 4 different varieties. That man had given 3 categories, this man had given 4. For him, the sample was university students. For this man, the source was his patients in the mental hospital. So, I mean, from where you are getting the sample, that also matters. So it shows that among his psychiatric patients, all the varieties were there. Very fit people were there. So that's a big question now. Can the physically fit people be mentally affected, mentally insane kind of, or the vice versa? See, every categorization of this kind, you'll have to go back and see the source. Like how right from the beginning, suppose when you were writing about Risley's classification, we were talking about a sample, Everywhere we have to see from where you are getting the sample. Most of the regular textbooks, if you refer to, people are busy writing the categorizations, and religiously they give the features. But what you miss out is from where you are getting the sample, and how can the categorization from the mental patients be applicable to general population? That was a big issue. But then that particular source is not highlighted in his writings. And this is the reason why because of such kind of weaknesses, these models are not used for the positive purposes, such as applications in the sports. Even today, when 5-6 major models are there in the somatotypic categorizations, especially in the biological anthropology sphere, Sheldon actually gained a lot of mileage because of the sample that he has taken, and he himself was trying to apply it for the purpose of suggesting the forms of sports or games, etc. for the people. So there was a direct application there. That in a nutshell is about Sheldon. Okay? So what you do is, in your book I have given the 3 major categories. What you are going to write now will be in addition to what is there in your material. Okay, make a note. Comment on Sheldon's somatotypic categorization. His threefold classification into endomorphs, mesomorphs, and ectomorphs is applauded for substituting several visual measurements. Underline the word visual measurements. Though his sample was criticized, for representing one type of population, underline the word type, one type of population chosen from more or less the same economic class and pursuing higher learning, indicating more or less similar intellectual capabilities his study incorporated, number one, physical characteristics, two, behavioral aspects in general, three, tendency towards delinquency and criminality, tendency towards delinquency and criminality. Number four, possibility of advising the participants in choosing suitable sporting activities. Right in the next line. The correlated behaviors to each somatotype include endomorphs, right one below the other. Endomorphs are lazy and pleasure seeking. Mesomorphs, assertive and ambitious. Ectomorphs, shy and nervous. Right in the next paragraph. Such correlations were criticized by several authors, including, we are going to write several list of things there. Number one, Margaret Mead. For her, Sheldon did not use any experiments or tests to conclude on controversial behavioral element of criminality. According to her, more than endomorphs, mesomorphs possess the physical fitness to indulge in criminality. She considers attributing criminal tendencies based on physical forms was a pre-industrial phenomena. Pre-industrial phenomena, and hence Sheldon's scheme should be restricted to the field of sports anthropology. To the field of sports anthropology. Secondly, Cohen, C-O-H-E-N, Cohen, 2010, in his review of Sheldon's scheme, compared it with traditional Ayurveda that deals with three types of dosha. Three types of dosha. Number one, any Ayurvedic people there? Vata, which indicates similarities with ectomorphs in physical form. Second, Pitta, not father, Pitta, possessing mesomorphic characters. Thirdly, Kapha, K-A-P-H, Kapha, with endomorphy. Cohen finds that the three doshas indicate that all the physical forms, all the somatotypes have their own risks of health resulting in specific behavioral aspects. The correlation he finds between Sheldon's and Ayurveda's method of conclusion was both of them create a mental picture of the personality of individual based on the physical form. Nevertheless, criminality was a special edition from Sheldon. Criminality was a special edition from Sheldon that cannot be concluded. That cannot be concluded. Thirdly, Wordsworth, W-A-R-D, Wordsworth, 1979. Studied the prison inmates in Britain, and found that most of them were of small stature, average build, and attained puberty later to the general population. Hence, he criticized endomorphs being described to be more criminal in behavior. Continue with him. For him, body type can be modified based on environment, and based on the occasion and requirement, training can modify the physique. Training can modify the physique. Right now, he studied East African populations subject to famines in the recent past, and noted endomorphs turning to ectomorphs. Endomorphs turning to ectomorphs. Secondly, preference for a somatotype changes according to the age of the individual. I think you must have noticed when children are small, you expect them to be very cuddly, very chubby, and if you hold it should be like very cozy kind of. But as you are growing up, as the child is growing up, you expect them to slow down, a triangular form there. Not really done. Not really done. And when you are doing this, you are stereotyping the children also. Because the other day I was seeing this 7-year-old girl. She was not eating enough, so I was asking what she says that if I eat this particular thing, I would become fat. I should not be, and hence kind of. I don't know from where people are actually. The children are learning those things. Right from the age 7, she is into that. What we say? Whatever. No, I don't want to use that word. Kind. Ma? Maybe, yeah. Yeah. I know. Right on. That is preference for athletic bodies. Preference for athletic bodies. During the pubertal age compared to preference for endomorphy at the young age. Continue there. The work of Lester, L-E-S-T-R, the work of Lester, 1993, demonstrated changing such preferences, changing such preferences in the mainstream American population. Lastly, Baum-Vogel, this name we will get again, V-O-G-E-L, Baum-Vogel, links preference for physical forms with social selection. According to him, one cannot conclude behavioral elements based on the somatotypic look It is social selection, enculturation that drive individuals to a behavioral form. He also points at the possibility of physical forms dictated by the social forces. Right in the next line. And hence, Sheldon's scheme has been controversial in the context of concluding on criminality. But served better in kinanthropometry. write a note there. We'll come back on that. Sheldon's work can be compared. Sheldon's work can be compared with that of D.N. Majumdar, with that of D.N. Majumdar. Majumdar tried to use blood group studies to understand criminal tribes, which was equally controversial. Which was equally controversial. Finished writing this also. Kretschmer's system. Kretschmer's system. Based on his studies in 1972, 72 to 92, 20 years of study. Based on his studies of 1972, with a sample from his patients of mental hospital, he categorized into 4 somatotypes. 3 I have given there. The 4th one we'll see. Picnic, athletic, aesthetic. You can take that down. You leave 2 more columns on this other side so that you can finish in one table the entire comparison. You have to add 2 more columns there. So you can see the personality characterization he's giving: social and helping others. Unlike the lazy attitude given by Sheldon. I can't remember a student that we had. He used to have his own chair because for whatever health reasons, he couldn't use the chairs given in. So he had deposited one chair that is his. So you must have heard that airlines was considering actively additional baggage charge for the fat people above a particular amount. There was a proposal. So far not done, but and then there is also a proposal to allow you to buy 2 seats for yourself. Yes. One may not be sufficient for you, so you buy 2, so that you are properly fitting in and the neighbor is also not unhappy with you. So I think that sounds good, rather than saying that we will fine you, you say that, see, we are providing a provision that you buy 2. athletic, healthy, balance between muscle and bone, energetic, optimistic, adjust to any situation, aesthetic, thin, lean, tall, no muscle, only bone. May I go? This is a comparison actually. So you can add it there. The three categories of Sheldon, the three categories of Sheldon, and then perhaps the last one you can add these characteristics is trying to make from Sheldon. So you would be adding two columns there. This is the column giving the characteristics from Sheldon's scheme. Look to be largely similar because both of them are trying to describe the physical form here. In fact, you have written a long list. I mean, you have a long list that is given to you. Yes, hey. So that was Kretschmer's scheme. I'll take you elsewhere. एक टॉपिक है gaining popularity now. UPSC had given applied anthropology, but we are looking for a combination. We are there. Largely the topics that we talk about in the next few days will be on chapter 12. Nevertheless, I have to right now give you information on action and applied anthropology. You don't find this title in your syllabus, ठीक है? Applied anthropology versus action anthropology. From the face of it, you must be able to conclude something. I'll first want to listen to that. This thing we do it many times, and what we understand on the face of it. Applied anthropology and action anthropology. People do write this thing in the exam because we generally give such questions in the compulsory lot. Applied anthropology versus action anthropology. कुछ तो बोलो, then I'll go. What for you apply? What is the meaning of applied? In action, who is in action actually? For what purpose you are acting? To solve the problems. Okay, great. Applied is? Action is always with respect to output. Okay. ठीक है. हाँ जी सर, చెప్పండి. फिर से बताइए. As far as the later part is concerned, that is action anthropology, you are trying to solve a problem, that is well taken. But when it comes to the first explanation that you have given application for developmental schemes, that is not in the right way there. I will put it this way. Maybe to begin with, I think, no, I didn't get all that. I will introduce one name based on which I'll start talking, giving the gist of them. Soltax, nothing like a tax anyway, that's the name of a person, Soltax, who had given the title Action Anthropology. I'll give a brief idea about them and maybe perhaps we will try noting a few more things. We all know that anthropology had emerged because of the colonial influence, especially of the British. And the reason we had been maybe harping over time and again right from the beginning was we always said that this is a discipline to understand the others. What you do after understanding, that is different. So applied anthropology of two genres actually. One was the American version, the other was the British version. In the case, so if at all we see in the way of emergence of applied anthropology, it was the British applied anthropology that had come first, and American applied anthropology came much later. ठीक है. So on the front of British anthropology, it is more or less considered to be similar to what we call colonial anthropology, meaning the interest is very well understood. Why we are doing anthropological, why they were doing anthropological research was to serve the colonial interest. So once you understand the others, you are actually using that understanding for your own benefit. You're there. On the other hand, when it comes to the American applied anthropology, that had emerged more or less near to the World War, the Second World War to be more precise, a little earlier to that. And we saw that it is an altogether different genre of anthropology that emerged in American anthropology, unlike the British version. They were not truly colonial in spirit, but then they were trying to understand what was called a culture change or the societal change because of the intermingling of multicultural communities, because of how the industrialization was spreading into the Indian populations. I repeat what I said. I was saying that applied anthropology can be seen as two varieties, one by the founders themselves, two by the Americans. The first one can be called colonial anthropology. Second one, we call it from various titles, but some of the areas of their interest was studying social change, impact of industrialization, or the intermingling of multicultural communities. You know pretty well that that was the continent that came into existence. The population of today is the result of the migration of various European and other populations. So when multicultural populations are existing, how the cultural changes are occurring and how the adjustments are occurring, that was the subject matter there, number one. Secondly, how the Indian populations, meaning the Red Indian populations, when they were coming in contact with the mainstream Americans or the European migrant populations, in what ways the Indian populations were changing. So when I'm saying all this, the central theme of them is understanding change, or maybe inflicting change. This whole story gets, I mean, a little bit, you know, complicated. But let me try to simplify it. If you look at the American applied anthropology, it is more or less into darkness by using one single word there. You're forcing a change on them, trying to study the Indian populations and trying to thrust a change on them. So it can be seen as maybe you try to cover it up by saying that, see, we are trying to spread the developmental aspects on them. I hope you're following. See, American applied anthropologists, they claim, they seem to be ethnocentric by saying that the British version was colonial one, we have a developmental version. But from there the new problems start. The colonial anthropology, colonial applied anthropology of the Britain was giving one kind of problem to the people that are getting exposed to the colonial masters and anthropologists themselves. On the other hand, the American applied anthropology was trying to bring the new kinds of problems to the people. You are assisting the governments in spreading what is called development among the Indian populations, so exposing the Indian populations to new problems of development. You are there? Are you there? Did you understand what I said? So there's a timeline difference. There's a timeline difference. The British anthropology was early to emerge, and the kind of damage was spread across the tens of years there, decades there. On the other hand, the American applied anthropology or American mode of spreading development was happening at a faster pace, eliminating the Indian cultures much faster. Are you there? Maybe because of that the Britons are called much just people. They are called, they are considered to be humanitarian. They are considered to be more just, ideologically stronger when compared to the Americans. Whereas Americans would want to move swifter, elimination or whatever, that has to be much swifter, whereas these people gradually sulk you to the pressures and then slowly try to erode you, kind of. I did not say anything. That's a comparison there. These two versions were criticized by him. Soltak says both of them are driven by paternalistic tendencies. Are you there? You're following? You're all good, sir, on a Sunday morning? Yeah? ఆదివారం సమయమున కాదు. जी सर. Integration may be the aspiration, or integration may be the poster that you are showing. It's the advertisement that you are making. But in reality, finally, it will be assimilation. Whether you are willing or they are willing. Telugu vastama? Telugu. You don't know. Em cheyalem. But still, it is something like ముందు ఆవిడ ప్రేమించింది, నేను ప్రేమించాల్సి వచ్చింది అన్నట్టు. ఆయనకి ట్రాన్స్లేట్ చేయండి. పక్క ఆయన నిద్రపోతున్నారా? ఆయనకి చెప్పండి. మీరు నిద్రపోతున్నారండి? లేదు కదా, ట్రాన్స్లేట్ చేయండి. సో ఇట్స్ లైక్ దట్. వెన్ యూ అండర్స్టాండ్ యూ లాఫ్. I'll react to that. Because that question I would have expected in the first week of the course. Yeah, I do also understand that maybe it is based on who is writing the story, who is writing the history. So I may say that it is it is not the anthropologists that are writing this history, if I'm saying. When you say that it's a fact or so, whatever has happened has already it had already happened, meaning the colonial fellows had come, anthropologists assisted them, and they came with a purpose. For the purpose, these people were used as a tool. So all the story, when it is being narrated, it is narrated by people who came much later. So I take it as a fact from the way the discipline had narrated it. But if at all you say that it all depends on from which part of the history you are seeing, from which angle you are seeing, it may vary. So for now we consider it to be a fact because you are studying anthropology. Outside anthropological realm, you can say that anthropologists have created a very beautiful story.
My intent was, can we quote? Can we
Surely, yes. You have to, because you have to get marks. Ultimately for marks we are here, right? Many times, it doesn't serve a purpose by winning an argument. We need not have to win an argument. We have to win marks. That is more than sufficient. Do whatever the examiner wants you to do. He wants you to jump like monkey, you will have to jump like monkey because he might give 5 more marks. Doesn't matter. Sometimes I may not be able to give convincing answers for you because your ears would be wanting to hear something. I may not be able to say that because I'm trying to work in the box of the discipline. So even if he was of that kind, I'll tell you his story. The story I didn't want to talk in today's class, but then because it has come, I'll have to. He was by German origin. Soltax was a German origin person. Parents were Germans. And right from the beginning, he had seen that class fight while he was growing. He was subject to all kinds of suppression. So every time he was trained by the father, he was told by the father that, see, you have to talk, you have to air out your views, you will have to fight for your rights. So this kind of a liberal thought, a fighting thought was given by the parent to him. And see, all this kind of a training eventually would take you somewhere. You wouldn't know that you're planning for something. But whatever goes in, that makes you a person later. And hence, the kind of work, see, he had chosen anthropology because he found that anthropology was a discipline that was giving an opportunity, a freedom to the writer, a freedom to the reader to speak something that others are not able to speak. That liberty was there. The rules were of a different genre here. Suppose you are speaking in economics, you are speaking in sociology, there were strict ways of responding. You have to respond from their perspective, etc. The rules were stringent. You did not have the kind of liberalism to say that, okay, I will consider their perspective and write from them. And when I am taking their viewpoint, I should also be taking theirs, I should also be taking theirs. And finally, when I am giving respect to all the viewpoints, I may also put my own masala there. So, I have a liberty to do all this stuff. You will have to respect every viewpoint in the discipline. And then that's where, cultural relativism comes into picture. Here there is a possibility of believing that there are multiple truths and multiple ways of doing the same thing. And everybody may be right in their own way, and hence you cannot be judgmental. But then when a problem situation emerges, and in the problem situation he thought that anthropologists were not playing a role. Whether it is the American applied anthropologists or British applied anthropologists, they were actually trying to bring very glorious concepts of understanding the others. What will you do after understanding? That's where he says there has to be a role. Whenever there's a problem emerging, he believed that you have to be a part of it. You have to be a part of it. You should live with them. See, Soltax was somebody who had taken the participant observation to an altogether different level. See, we have already answered this question on participant observation. Maybe perhaps to the 3 genres that we have added there, we can incorporate Soltax as the 4th one. He used this word action anthropology He believed that anthropologist has to live with them, understand them, and make them party to the understanding. Look at that. Even Malinowski was trying to use informers and all that. So there's a difference. There's a difference in that kind of a participant observation. You are doing that not to solve any problem. You are doing that for your own pleasure. You want to create some kind of a masterpiece of literature, and hence you are trying to live with them, try to understand them. It was something like, exotic things being publicized. And one very interesting thing is, all these applied anthropologists, they were trying to work on the holism. On the other hand, action anthropologists were trying to identify pinpointedly the problem, take them into confidence, and maybe perhaps you become an activist. If you could recall Narmada Bachao Andolan's story, the people that are associated, the anthropologists that are associated with them, they are the action anthropologists. Or for that matter, if you look at Heimendorf, the way he was trying to fight for the rights of the shifting cultivators, you take them into confidence and then work out what is their perspective, what is it that they want. And based on that, you become a mouthpiece of the people there. That is to solve a problem. Many times you may not be able to solve. There it shows the failure of action anthropologists. And also you will have to understand, very, very important difference here. Applied anthropologists are largely academicians. They depend on the funds given by the universities or the commissions or the governmental bodies, whether it is army, whether it is whatever department you are associated with, you are dependent on them. That's where we said it is paternalistic. Most often action anthropologists are self-funded. They are based on voluntarism. So there is a difference in the spirit of working. There's a difference in spirit of working and maybe the extent of work also. Action anthropologists cannot be there everywhere. You cannot be funding yourself and trying to be a messiah of every troubled people. It's not really possible. And that's where, somewhere voluntarism dies out. Problems are there everywhere, but you don't have so many funds. So more or less it remained something like, project-based handling. But then each of those works can give some kind of an idea to the anthropologist, to the government, provide a different way of looking at things. So whenever there is a problem, their requirement will be there, the action anthropologists. They are not the people who can be there every time. They would emerge, they have to emerge when there is a problem. But then I should also tell this. Salt tax was also criticized by Margaret Mead somehow. Mead had a problem with him. I mean, not a personal one though. You remember when their own teacher Boaz said that I don't belong to any school, they gave a label to him. They wouldn't leave anybody, they label. The general practice in the field is, what you do in the field is based on what you believe theoretically. What you do in the field is based on what is the theoretical basis on which you come. If you are a functionalist, your research will be of one kind. If you are a structuralist, your research will be of one kind. So there is a perfect link between your theory and what you do on the field. On the other hand, what Mead talks about, salt taxes, and that group of people is, they don't prescribe, they don't subscribe to one particular ideology. They don't subscribe to one particular ideology. They don't subscribe to one specific kind of theoretical approach. On the other hand, they try to incorporate every approach that is there in the discipline. Are you there? It looks like, a cultural relativism with regard to the theories. Are you able to follow what I'm saying? Don't sleep off, sir. I know I'm troubling you. So that was the criticism given by Mead. You don't subscribe to one theoretical approach. You try to accommodate every theoretical approach which is literally not practicable. No, if you are agreeing with one approach, you are not agreeing with the other. ऐसा नहीं कि उसका भी चाहिए, इसका भी चाहिए, सभी का नहीं. It doesn't work out. You will have to be clear on your theoretical foundations. So these people, they do not have a theory of themselves. And she was also critical that they don't have a specialized training. On the other hand, let me finish off that so that you can write. They don't have a specialized training in applied in action anthropology. But applied anthropology, you have training. One theoretical foundation you will take up, based on that you do your research. On the other hand, here, you don't have a specialized training. Maybe you it's like a piecemeal thing. If a researcher, a chief researcher, a professor would want to pick up one problem. If you want to pick up one problem, maybe he would take up his students, his assistants, and then he would try to explain to them, send them there. And see, in the case of applied anthropology, you have particular time frame, 6 months, 1 year, whatever, within which you will finish your work, submit your dissertation, and then you go. But in the case of action anthropology, you will have to be there till the problem is solved. And hence you will have to be very clear what kind of problems you take up. Don't get into wife and husband problems. You will be stuck there. You will never solve, you will never come out. So you actually should, and then years of journey will be there. You will be spending there years. And after the problem is solved, what is the future for you? Their problem you are solving. It might add up to one line or one page in your CV. But after that, what? For applied anthropologists, good number of jobs are there. Go to any department, you have jobs. Action anthropologists are seen as rebels. If you are hiring them, they may end up creating additional problems in the organization. So no jobs for action anthropologists. So it had a very small time in terms of when people try to, and even now people try to use it based on the individual's personality and choice. They try to use this, but it couldn't make a big name because it didn't give many job opportunities to anthropologists. Are you there? That is the conclusion. Okay? And you won't find these arguments in any of the regular books, so don't worry about searching. अब बाद में आप लाओगे ये book में नहीं है, वो book में नहीं है, नहीं रहेगा. We generally take it up from the journals only, and based on the arguments of different people, we try to generate this stuff. ठीक है? बच्चे पूछते भी हैं पूरे case studies कहाँ मिलेंगे? मिलेंगे. लिख लीजिए. Applied and action anthropology. Applied and action anthropology. Categorization of applied anthropology based on the content, method of studying, and purpose was first done by Soltax. According to him, number one, American applied anthropology was based on, right in quotes, the humanitarian New Deal program aiming at progressive industrial ideology. Secondly, the British applied anthropology was based on the humanitarian advisory function for colonial administration, especially in Africa. Right, in the next slide. Both these versions were criticized in 1960s and 70s in the writings of Soltax. In the writings of Soltax. Soltax identified the tendency of emergence of, right in quotes, institutional anthropology, unquote. It refers to emergence of anthropology in the specific departmental work such as educational anthropology, medical anthropology, etc. Such a tendency was noticed both in American and British anthropologies. In the former, it was due to an American academic practice of working towards specializations. Okay. In the case of the British or colonial anthropology, with most of the colonies getting independence, colonial anthropologists had to redefine their role. In the respective colonies, the successors of colonial anthropologists emerged with particular works, diversifying the role of anthropologists. In both the cases, right in the next paragraph, in both the cases, the social sciences such as sociology and economics were emulated unsuccessfully by the anthropologists, because anthropology's focus has been tribal and non-industrial, non-contemporary societies actually, at one point of time, Mead tells Soltax, see, when you're so unhappy with anthropology because you say that we are not addressing their problems, we are not able to give solutions, you better get out of the discipline. Why is it that you're still there in the discipline of anthropology? Soltax makes it clear that, anthropology at least gives me a freedom to think from the other side, whereas the other disciplines do not accommodate that kind of a humanitarian way. And hence I'm here, maybe he says that we will have to reinvent our role. So he says that's where we are failing. We are every time struck with the so-called ethics towards our own pattern rather than ethics towards our discipline, ethics to our own subjects. So he says as long as we redefine our value system, we will not be able to do enough. And we should not, because we already know that we cannot stick to the so-called primitive, the so-called tribal. There are many contemporary issues that we will have to address. So we should become problem-oriented specialists. And he says, no, I will not leave it. So he remained in that discipline. He tried to train his people, but no, not much of an encouragement. As I said to you, no jobs for them, and hence. So, come down. Steve Polgar categorized anthropology into different versions, such as applied anthropology, action anthropology, a radical anthropology, and committed anthropology, like committed husband, committed anthropology. You don't find a trace of them these days. On the other hand, John Bennett classified them into applied and action anthropology. He combined a radical, committed, and action anthropologies into a common head of action anthropology. John Bennett based his writings on Soltax. Continue writing there. The authors such as Bennett, John Bennett, the authors such as John Bennett, Soltax, and remember this name, Del Himes. Del Himes believed in giving a new identity and purpose, giving new identity and purpose to anthropology in the form of action anthropology. Del Himes, in his book Reinventing Anthropology, brought out the criticisms of applied anthropology. According to him, anthropology's content and purpose changed from pre-war to post-war times. Under the pre-war, you can write as holism. In the pre-war times, holism was a way of studying culture. Holism was a way of studying culture. During war, especially in American applied anthropology, anthropologists under the leadership of American Anthropological Association, AAA, worked under the patronage of the government in various departments, including foreign offices, war rooms, and in industrial planning committees. In the post-war times, the anthropologists were supposed to go back to holism. Go back to holism, right in the brackets, as was initially planned by American Anthropological Association. Bracket close. On the other hand, the reversal did not happen. The reversal did not happen. But anthropologists increased their fieldwork. with increasing specialization, they resorted to comparative studies in every emerging sub-branch of anthropology. Right, in the next line. According to Delheims, the drawbacks of applied anthropology, include, number one, working on the patronage of the master. Working on the patronage of the master. Secondly, lacking power to effect a change or influence the policy. That is, even if hired, they were informal and advisory in nature. Thirdly, the ethics of intervention were always leaning towards the patrons, and neither to the subject in the sense the one whom you are studying, neither towards the subject nor towards the discipline. Fourthly, they lacked the training necessary to deal with the emerging issues. Right, in the next line. And hence, they called for action anthropology. The role of action anthropology number one, to help communities as volunteers through self-funding and research grants. Secondly, making subjects the participants in their field research. Thirdly, articulating grievances, respecting different points of view. These characteristics and ways of work are ultimately aimed at delivering what is right in quotes anthropology, unquote. In other words, to address the issues of the suppressed and the discriminated against. Right in the next paragraph. Soltax, who spearheaded the action anthropology movement, spelt out the mechanism of action anthropological work in the absence of patronage. The field depends on exclusive interest of the professors who pick up specific issues and controversies from the field. Specific issues and controversies from the field, using their own students, based on their own philosophy, train them to be activists in the field, to provide solutions through participant observation and incorporating subjects at every level of research, and problem solving. Right in the next paragraph. Margaret Mead criticized action anthropology as merely a social work. Secondly, action anthropologists did not subscribe to any specific anthropological theoretical approach. Continue there. Under the pretext of cultural relativism, they tried incorporating different theoretical approaches, even if they contradicted one another. Thirdly, they lacked proper training methods and most often were anti-establishment. Most often anti-establishment. Right in the next paragraph. Due to these features, use of action anthropology was limited and hence had short phases of survival, had short SHWRT, phases of development, survivals, short phases of survival, that intermittently kept rising, based on the interest of the researchers. Though Soltax and his supporters presented a big picture of action anthropology, lack of patronage, self-funding, radicalism at work, prevented its proliferation. All good? Prevented its proliferation. Give a quick reading of what you have written, a couple of minutes, then we'll. Did you make out the difference between them? One was more practical, limited in orientation, the other one was more wider, academic.
Does it not always, in every case, that one phase of action anthropology leads to revolution against the state?
See, it is assumed maybe that whenever you are picking up a problem, you will have to see who is causing the problem. So most often your idea is to address the one that are victimized. And most often the victims are from the downtrodden, from the primitive communities, indigenous communities. And hence the ones who are victimizing them could be the elitistic groups. The elite may be the economic elite, the class elite, or maybe the government itself. And even if it is not the government, the economic elite might be dictating terms to the government. So directly or indirectly, you are fighting against the elite. That's all. So what were the causes that you must have fought for in your college? You must have fought for something. You must have been a part of something or the other in a small or big way. What was that? Football. Very good. Food baaledu. Bed baaledu, food baaledu. Inka? Huh? That's anything else? Timing restriction. You wanted freedom. Yeah, freedom has its own cost. And I remember my own hostel where at one point of time too very free the hostel was, and we found that ghastly incident, I cannot forget, when a girl was actually found in the roadside nala, an inmate of hostel. I mean, that was a huge ghastly event. And those are the kind of incidents that make the restrictions really necessary. You cannot have everything at your hand. You cannot have freedom and you cannot have safety and security. And both cannot go hand in hand. There have to be limits every time. We want freedom, but your freedom ends where your nose stops. That's the kind of area where your freedom is. Okay? So, you have to fight, You should represent things, you should have to fight and do all that stuff. I really love my days with ABVP. We did nothing, now we were there, kind of. Anti-smoking, anti-that, anti-this. We are not pro to anybody. We are always anti only. So at one point of time I was anti-marriage. Can't help it. Sports anthropology. Every sport has got its own seasons, but we have cricket that is all season sport. As George Bernard Shaw said, 11 fools playing, 11,000 watching. At that time it was 11,000, now you have millions. As if not sufficient, we have introduced in America also. That was the only wise continent we found. Now, foolishness is contagious, going to that continent also. I have nothing against, only George Bernard Shaw said it, hence. So when we have to deal with the sports anthropology or kinanthropometry as it is called, we will be examining this from different perspectives. By the way, you read those 4 or 5 pages, the theoretical approaches, and it made some sense? Not exactly. We would see from historical perspective, structural, symbolic, biological or physical. Maybe perhaps economic. In a way, that is the function. Finally, you get money or not. Not all the sports are moneyed. A few can only get you money. So you try to go to the competition from there. We'll start with something interesting. I'm sure you'll love that. 2 small videos I'll show you. One is the original one. The other is, I don't know what you call it. Heard of Hakka? Hakka tribe? Hakka? Which region? New Zealand. Great. Thank you so much.
And now the All Blacks just waiting for the French to peel off the tracksuits, stand in front of them and receive the challenge of the haka. Well, the challenge has been received by the French. Stand by, the Rugby World Cup final.
Opponents are French. You can see the kind of aristocracy in them. I mean, if that is the kind of war you are declaring, आगे वाला तो खैर, no, उसकी तो गीली हो जाएगी. So you actually have to defend emotionally first. This is what we say, wars are more psychological. You are actually winning the game mostly by intimidating the other fellow. And this is something like their national anthem. National anthems are less powerful than these. This is ritualism in sport. I will show you something. This shows how well versed the Telugus are. Super wrestler.
భిక్షు యాదవ్ లీడర్ అయిన బుల్స్ టీమ్ కి పృథ్వీ లీడర్ అయిన ఈగిల్స్ టీమ్ కి మధ్య జరగబోయే రగ్బీ
The game starts in 5 minutes.
Horattia hai Goti!
Horattia hai Goti!
Horattia hai Goti!
Horattia hai Goti!
Horattia hai Goti! Oh, kamate kamote ko! Oh, kamate kamote ko! Oh, lagata! Raga didi! Ah, didi yahua! Bahua! Ah, kamate kamote didi!
He does the whole thing there. India's rugby team for 2019. Whose was the movie? The kind of knowledge he comes up with and the kind of inspiration he takes, not the imitation there. So, let me take you on with that. Sir, your syllabus in applied anthropology, whenever it comes into application, whichever field you take up, that entire chapter 12 has got different interesting contemporary topics, like you have forensic anthropology or eugenic studies or defense applications or sports, whichever you take up, there are two things that you'll have to incorporate. One is cultural studies of that particular field. The second one is anthropometric studies. Whenever we get into anthropometric studies, here in the case of sports, you will have to incorporate Sheldon's study. He was the one who was coming up with the prescription of a specific kind of sport for the individuals based on the physical caliber. On the other hand, there has been cultural studies. Acha, before I go there, how do you differentiate between a game and a sport? Games are informal, okay. Competition. Sport come with the tag of competition. Winning or losing becomes important. Whereas in the case of game, you're doing it for fun, maybe. You're doing it for fun. Whereas sport is something that becomes important in terms of economics, in terms of maybe the coverage that you are getting, and the monies that you may be winning and losing is more prestigious than anything. In the case of a game, winning or losing may not be so very significant. Acha, one of the very important sport that was already covered in your class was cockfights. We are naming it as sport now. It is no more a game, because winning or losing is not simply the win or a loss there, but then it comes with a lot of prestige out there. Now, from that perspective, if I am taking you, I'll give you a list of thinkers whom we will be talking about in the sports anthropology. Some seem to be getting repeated, but good lot of them. Norbert Elias, Bourdieu, Levi-Strauss, Bill Ross, Calhoun, Sands, and Blanchard. These are names, not abuses. Sounds so, but not in sports, but there can be special question symbolism in religion, as it was asked earlier also. We would see that was one kind of a symbolism we have seen, the haka, pre-event whatever performance. Anything else that you would do? You also must have been doing some stuff, rituals, any other named rituals associated with sport? Okay, or? Ma? Emo annaru? What was that? Okay. Or that's all? Yeah. Hit each other, beat each other, black and blue. Now, next, when you keep watching these episodes of various sports, events, etc., you keep a track of the rituals that you get into. Before entering the arena, boxing arena, you do certain things, maybe the kind of dress that you wear, the kind of intimidation that you do, the kind of worshipping that you do, all those are rituals. When I say ritual, I'm using this word here because these are all the symbols and rituals associated with the sport. And many times there is a confusion among the student that if at all the word ritual comes, you try to restrict it to the realm of religion alone. You have rituals everywhere. The sport also has rituals. Those things you will have to. And of course, what was the last sporting event that you must have attended? Not participated, but attended. IPL final Hyderabad lo. Okay, great. And that's all. మేము ఆడడానికి వెళ్తాం, చూడడానికి వెళ్ళాం. ISL football. What's the kind of feel that you get? I mean, why do you go and what's the kind of a feel? I'm sure, watching from there, they look to be so very minuscule. Maybe you need to have some kind of a binoculars or something to see them from a distance, or there also you are seeing a screen. But you go there for something else. Less of watching, more of something else. Maybe a lot of singing that goes on, and of course, the kind of discipline that we have in India, and that's so beautiful. And the kind of maintenance of the stadiums. I'll show you something. But that's not what I wanted you to know today. When is the next Olympic? Sir? Next year, where? Great. Thanks for that. I wanted to show some pictures, but no, I'll postpone that. Every sport comes up with its own requirements. I'm showing you one. You may perhaps see several of this kind.
We've taken 6 of the world's top athletes to find out what it takes to make a true Olympian. As we push their bodies to the max.
Sir, I'm choosing these genres because these are the kind of sports that are now actively taken up by anthropologists for work. If at all you see very traditional kind of textbooks, they might talk about maybe what suits, what's the kind of physique that is required for maybe a footballer, maybe a basketball player, maybe perhaps the bat gamers like, cricket or kind of. Of all the things, I think cricket is the one that requires the less amount of fitness. I'm not talking about the contemporary players who try to, kind of. I also do not want to comment on the person on the other side of the border who became very controversial. People started to show the kind of food that he eats, and whereas on this side of the border, the captain was sweating out in the gym. It's a theek hai bhai, kha liya. I mean, what's your problem? He ate. And then you make a big hell out of the story. And most of the people commenting were from his own country, and on this side people were so very jubilant, kind of. I mean, those are the very conventional genre. You try to look into the new kind of stories that are written in the discipline. So.
In the track and field program, the 3,000-meter steeplechase really is one of those brutal events. Classically, when you look at elite athletes, they make it look easy, but the ability to sustain these very high speeds whilst negotiating these very large barriers is an incredibly difficult thing to do and requires a huge amount of speed and aerobic endurance to be successful.
Soufiane El Bakkali is Morocco's leading steeplechaser. At just 20 years old, he not only made the final at the Olympic Games Rio 2016 at his first attempt, he also placed a remarkable 4th. We've brought Soufiane to the Manchester Institute of Health and Performance, a cutting-edge facility dedicated to exploring and developing some of sport's most elite talents.
The typical body shape of a 3,000-meter steeplechaser is very similar to that of an endurance runner. Invariably, they are light and they're very low in % body fat. Within steeplechase, we can often see short athletes. Equally, we can see very tall athletes, because it is also about the ability to negotiate barriers as well as run fast for 3,000 meters.
To succeed at the highest level, Soufiane needs both supreme endurance as well as excellent agility. The stats show he is one of the tallest men in his sport, but what are those vital anatomical advantages he needs to push him to the top of the podium?
هي ما كايناش قوة، هي كاين بحال ربي معاوننا. وكاين هناك قوة خاصة هي قوة العقل كي يقولوا العقل المدبر. إن شاء الله بالعقل كل شيء تيكون هو هذاك.
On the surface, at least, Soufiane looks lean and streamlined, but the DEXA scan will literally go under the skin of his body composition and show just how much more there is to this super slim athlete.
From the DEXA score, what we saw is a body fat percentage of 10.7%. That is exceptionally low, and in fact, it's one of the lowest that I have ever seen.
Elite track cyclists typically have a body fat percentage of just 12.3, while top triathletes are some of the leanest performers in sport at 8.6. Soufiane's 10.7% shows just how little fat or non-functional mass he's carrying in competition.
If you were looking to design the ultimate body type for an elite 3,000-meter steeplechaser, Soufiane would be exactly what you're looking for.
وبالنسبة لطول القامة ديالي هو بالفعل تيساعدني على اجتياز الموانع، والحمد لله هو تيعطيني واحد الدافع كبير انني تنشوف باللي.
You do this at home, sir. Don't fail on taking information from such. I mean, in fact, if you go to the Olympic channel, you get majority of the sports there. They have created all these videos. I mean, it was like maybe for the anthropology test, they are trying to give us information. You have comparative studies there, different sports and you have real-time names, contemporarily existing people. That actually does good. You have people from badminton also. You can go to see the kind of one picture is given, one graph is given there, the amount of body fat that is required, the kind of energy, the muscle matter. They give all those statistics. I mean, don't do much. This one and maybe one other favorite sport of yours that should look refreshing for the examiner. आप देखिए, you will really appreciate this particular kind of work. ठीक है, आज के लिए इतना ही. I'll meet you the day after tomorrow. You watch this back home. I think your site is also up this morning. We were trying to shift the whole thing to the other platform. अच्छा, मैं एक पिक्चर दिखाती हूँ, ठहरना, एक अच्छा सा पिक्चर, फिर चले जाना. Don't mind that I am showing this picture. That was my last sports event, last but one rather. After that I was there for one more. This was the last Commonwealth. My son was super excited seeing. See? He'll be your teacher. So I have to introduce your teacher, kind of. Sir, excuse me. We are at 58, chapter 11. We wrote about somatotypes. Secondly, concept of applied and action anthropology. We have just introduced kinanthropometry. We'll be completing that. On the same day when we do this, I will also be taking up defense anthropology in continuation of that. So I have given the revised timetable. You can perhaps. Sources you have two. Most of the theories I have given in physical anthropology books. Respect the content, read it, have a good time.